Have you ever been told not to go somewhere and just thought, challenge accepted? Well, that's exactly the vibe abandoned asylums give off. These are not big, well-known ones you hear about on every ghost tour. These are the forgotten facilities, tucked away in remote places, hidden behind locked gates, places so obscure that most people don't even know they exist. Yet when people are told to stay out, curiosity takes over. Explorers slip through fences, cross rivers, climb into collapsed hallways just to see what lies behind the warnings. Today we're uncovering 10 of the most hidden and forbidden asylums. These are real stories with zero fluff, and they will make you wonder why anyone would risk going in. Imagine rowing across a quiet stretch of water, pulling up to a small island, and realizing the crumbling buildings in front of you once held hundreds patients. That's Peat Island, located north of Sydney. It opened in 1911 and was notorious for its treatment of people with intellectual disabilities. Ward 4 was basically a prison inside a hospital. Patients locked down in isolation. Reports of harm and neglect piled up for decades, and multiple people lost their lives under suspicious circumstances. The asylum officially closed in 2010, and the government sealed it off, but that only attracted explorers. Some swam or rowed over, sneaking into wards overgrown with vines and scattered with broken chairs. Inside, they found peeling walls, rusted beds, rooms frozen in time, some still filled with medical furniture. To this day, Peat Island remains closed to the public, but its eerie reputation keeps pulling people across the water. What if a grand Tuscan villa, once a symbol of wealth and comfort, ended up remembered only as a haunted asylum? That is Ville Sbertoli, built in 1868. As a luxury estate. It was converted into a psychiatric institution after World War II. Patients stayed there until it finally closed in 1978. Since then, the villas have stood silent on the hillside. No official tours run here. The area is fenced off. That hasn't stopped explorers from slipping through to wander the sprawling complex. Inside, faded murals still cover some of the walls. Old electroconvulsive therapy machines sit abandoned in corners. Patient sketches and words are scratched into plaster. People who trespassed reported hearing a piano play on its own, ghostly moans from empty corridors, and an overwhelming sadness that seemed to hang over the whole property. It's become one of Italy's most chilling forgotten landmarks, but its decay can only be seen by those daring enough to break in. What if you came across a towering 16-story psychiatric high-rise and decided to climb inside, knowing its upper floors once housed the criminally insane? That's the Terrence building, part of the Rochester State Hospital. It opened in 1959 and at its peak held more than 1,000 psychiatric patients. Inside, entire floors were reserved for dangerous patients, others for geriatrics, and some even contained morgues and laboratories. By 1995, the building was abandoned, and it quickly became a magnet for trespassers. People who snuck in described finding patient rooms stripped bare, but also areas where hospital equipment remained scattered around. The scale of the building is overwhelming, with floor after floor of identical hallways. In 2019, fires damaged the site, but explorers still entered afterward, risking both arrest and structural collapse. The Terrence building is still completely off limits, but that's never stopped people from climbing its stairwells and wandering through its hollow, haunted halls. Behind the history of a crumbling castle near Glasgow lies a disturbing story. Lennox Castle was converted into a hospital for people with learning disabilities in the 1930s. By the 80s, inspectors described appalling conditions, malnutrition, mistreatment of patients. By the time it shut down in 2002, the hospital's reputation was completely ruined. After closure, the building was sealed, but locals continued sneaking in. In 2008, a fire gutted sections of it, leaving behind charred hallways and eerie ruins. But explorers still climb through broken walls to see what remains, and they will report an atmosphere that feels both grand and terrifying, with parts of the castle echoing like a cathedral, but filled with reminders of neglect. An odd twist adds to this. Singer Lulu was born there when part of the facility also served as a maternity unit. Today, Lennox Castle is fenced off, but it keeps drawing curious explorers with its mix of history, tragedy, and decay. Imagine stepping into an asylum so eerie that even the objects left behind look like props from a horror movie. That's the Manicomio di Voghera. Locals call it the painful city, and for good reason. It closed in 1998, and since then its rooms have been left to rot. Inside, explorers have found broken gurneys, decaying hospital beds, and most unsettling, mannequins scorched by fire. Oh, mannequins. Never a good sight. Baby high chairs also sit abandoned, old x-rays, patient records, stained papers litter the floor, red streaks mark some of the walls. Photographers who entered illegally captured images that looked almost staged for horror films, but every detail is real. This asylum is rarely mentioned outside of Italy, but it remains one of the most visually disturbing abandoned institutions in Europe. What if your local legends dared you to visit an asylum that may or may not have existed, and those who went swore they saw ghosts? That is Roney's Point near Ohio County. The stories say it was once a sanitarium, where horrific things took place. In reality, records of an official asylum there are scarce, but the ruins of an old estate give fuel to the tales. Explorers driving down the dark, tree-lined road report a chilling atmosphere here. Some say they felt watched the entire time. Others claim to see shadowy figures darting between the trees. A rumor circulates about a man with a firearm who guards the site, chasing off anyone who dares to come too close. The truth of its history is blurry, but the trespassing accounts are consistent. People go in out of curiosity and leave terrified, insisting something unnatural still lingers at Roney's Point. What if the ghost of an asylum still haunted the replacement building long after the original was torn down? The Sheboygan County Asylum opened in the 1800s and closed in 1940. It was later demolished, and a new healthcare center was built on the site. But the legends didn't die. People insist the new building is haunted because of what once stood there. Urban explorers have sneaked in after hours, reporting disembodied voices, unexplained claps, whispers in the dark. The confusing part is that they're not in the asylum at all. The building they enter never housed patients, but it's still tied so closely to the asylum's reputation that people feel that same terror. The legacy of this asylum shows how even when a structure is gone, the stories of what happened there never really leave. What if you trespassed on a site so old that the buildings are gone, but the stories still cling to the ground? Sheriff Hill Asylum opened in the early 19th century and closed by 1880. Nothing physical remains today, but the stories are unsettling. Reports from the past describe patients escaping and harming their families, rooftop breakouts, and locked wards where patients were never seen again. Historians sometimes visit the site, walking through the empty fields where the asylum used to be. Locals tell of strange feelings in the area, as if the land itself remembers. Even though there are no walls to climb, just being on the old grounds feels like trespassing into history, and the chilling stories continue to keep people away. What if a burned asylum inspired a legend so strong that people still sneak into the woods to test it? In York County, Pennsylvania, local folklore insists that a psychiatric hospital once burned down, leaving behind only a series of gates leading into the woods. They say there are 7 gates, and if you pass through all of them, you end up in hell. The truth is, no asylum ever stood here, but the gates are real, and the legend has fueled decades of trespassing. People hike through the woods at night, looking for each gate, daring one another to pass through. Police reports confirm that locals have been caught wandering private property chasing the story. Even though the asylum never existed, the fear and fascination are very real. It's a haunting example of how myth and trespassing can overlap to create something that feels undeniably true. What if one of the most intact asylums from the 19th century stood right in front of you, locked and forbidden, a perfect time capsule? That's Kenmore Psychiatric Hospital in New South Wales. It opened in the 1890s and remained in operation for decades. The sprawling complex included wards, treatment buildings, and staff housing. After it closed, Kenmore was listed as a heritage site, which meant it could not simply be demolished. In 2021, a fire destroyed one of the wards, but a lot of the hospital is still standing, sealed off from the public. That hasn't stopped trespassers from slipping in. Inside, they'll find rusted beds, intact records, wards that look frozen in time. Explorers have described the strange sensation of stepping into a building that feels abandoned but is perfectly preserved. Plans exist to turn it into housing or a museum, but for now, it's just sitting there, forbidden and irresistible to those chasing history and chills. With all that said, I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.